This is the state of play in the title race, and as we've said, Liverpool can go 11 points clear at the top of the table with victory today after Arsenal lost at home to West Ham yesterday. Mikel Arteta very, very angry with his side's performance. Sam Dean, you were there. 60,000 others shared that sentiment, didn't they? Very, very angry by the end.
Very much so, yeah. It was quite instructive to see how many fans were sort of heading towards the exits with 10 minutes still to play, with Arsenal only trailing by one goal in a title race. But I think that kind of captured the mood a bit at the Emirates right now, and the mood around Arsenal, where I feel that sense of belief that they need if they are to win this title is kind of ebbing away. And I think the real start of that was the injury to Kai Havertz in Dubai. Obviously, they got away with it against Leicester last week when Mikel Merino was repurposed as a centre-forward to spectacular effect. But I don't think anyone in the Arsenal fan base, or probably even in the Arsenal club itself, really thought that the Merino up front thing was going to be sustainable for the next few weeks at least. And as it proved yesterday, when West Ham were the better team, they defended deep and said, come on then, Arsenal, what have you got? And Arsenal didn't have much, to be honest, going forward. And I do think people will look back at this title race and think that Havertz injury was probably the defining moment in the end, from Arsenal's point of view anyway. Yeah,
that is the point, isn't it, Darren? That it's not the result in isolation for Arsenal yesterday. It's the wider point that is the right word from Sam, sustainable. It's not sustainable to be playing Premier League matches without a recognised forward.
No, it's not. I mean, the question last weekend was whether Mikel Merino was the solution up front, and he was never going to be. He's a midfielder, he's playing up front. West Ham found it very easy to deal with him. I actually think the defining moment was in January when that window closed and there wasn't another striker, because I actually have a lot of sympathy for Arsenal in so much as they probably looked at the numbers. Last season, they had the second best attack in the Premier League behind Manchester City. There were players who were taking responsibility in that front line. You can't praise them for that and then hammer them for luck and everything else going against them this time around. So I've got a lot of sympathy with Mikel Arteta over that. It's very easy in our knee-jerk culture for people to suddenly start saying, is he the right man, and this, that and the other. But when you look at what he's built, when you look at the fact that they still do have the best defensive record in the Premier League this season, which is quite curious actually, considering they've only got 2 clean sheets in their last 8 games. But they've put themselves, with that recruitment policy, in a position where they never again have to be reliant on one man at the back as they were with Saliba a couple of seasons ago. But now up front, it looks as though they've learned more lessons, in so much as you cannot be reliant solely on a Saka, a Havertz. You've got to have more. I remember when Liverpool bought Gakpo, I think it was December 22, and I was quite fascinated. Sorry, Nunes it might have been. And I was quite fascinated because they'd already had Jota, they already had Diaz, they already had Salah. But if you're chasing a title, you cannot have enough weapons in your armoury.
I think you're talking about when they signed Luis Diaz, aren't you?
Diaz was already at the club. Jota was already at the club.
Gakpo was the January, yeah.
Gakpo came in the January. And you know, I remember at the time just thinking, interesting, you know, because you've got so much in your armoury. But when you look at the points, when you look at the goal difference, when you look at the games that Liverpool have managed to get over the line ahead of other clubs that have stumbled and fallen, you realise why they invested so much in that front line.
So the point about strikers is a fascinating one, isn't it? Because there was a time Mikel Arteta was quite strident on it in one of his press conferences in January, and he's obviously right that it wasn't the case that, you know, the Arsenal recruitment department were sat with their feet on the desk saying, don't worry, lads, it'll be fine. They were obviously looking. Yeah. But to what extent is doing something, anything, whether it's a free agent, whether it's a short-term loan, better than nothing at all, which is what they've ended up with?
The problem there, I think their view, Arsenal's view, was it's no point just getting a body in for the sake of it.
Agree.
Because they have to, A, if they spent money on it, it would then affect their budget for the summer, for example, and their long-term plans there. And B, if a player comes in who wasn't really going to make a huge amount of difference, then what's the point anyway? The issue was, the gamble they took with that was the gamble of Havertz being fit. And that was, you can argue that was a fair gamble to take, given Havertz's injury record. Because you look at his career, he's actually never been out for a long length of time. Last season, he started pretty much every game in the second half of the campaign, played every minute. Like, his physical durability has been quite extraordinary for a long time. And they looked at that and they added it up and calculated who was out there, how much are they available for, crucially in the case of Ollie Watkins. Is it worth doing, or should we make that gamble? And they decided, I think collectively, I do think it was a collective decision in the end, to take that gamble. And then within about 2 weeks of it, they'd lost. Yeah, that's what happens. You gamble and you can lose.
Yeah.
And that's what happened now. And I think now, knowing what they know about Havertz and Martinelli injuries too, they would just take a body. I think if they could go back in time, they would just take anyone.
And that is the point, isn't it? That Ollie Watkins is a premium striker. He's a high-class player, and the timing of the bid, you can argue with. But whether there was a short-term free agent, whether there was a loan...
But Rob, you're talking about Arsenal Football Club. I mean, you're talking about one of the biggest clubs in Europe. You can't just take anyone at Arsenal.
No, I appreciate that, but there's a middle ground between anyone and Ollie Watkins, isn't there?
Yeah.
Yes,
but there weren't that many options out there.
Exactly.
Who moved that Arsenal could have gone for, do you think? Matis Tell, maybe?
Possibly, yeah.
Possibly. In hindsight, maybe they should have.
So the interesting point yesterday is that if you watch the Chelsea-Villa game, and Jamie Redknapp afterwards makes a salient point, as the cameras are on the two lone boys walking off, Marco Asensio and Marcus Rashford, he said, I think there might be a few technical directors around Europe who are thinking, there's one we could have gone for. And again, hindsight's a wonderful thing, because at the time people are saying Marcus Rashford is not in the best of shape or the best of form. Yeah. But someone like Marco Asensio, I mean, could Arsenal have looked at him? Maybe they did. We're speculating, obviously.
More of an attacking midfield player, I suppose, rather than a number 9. I think in that case. And Rashford, they couldn't loan him because they already had 2 Premier League loanees anyway. So, you know, I totally see the argument. And I think, in hindsight, Arsenal fans would be justified in saying anybody, like literally just a body who can play up front and has some experience at top level, will be better than what they currently have. But at the time they made the decision, they had Havertz and Martinelli fit. It's just the way the cookies crumbled that 2 weeks later they don't. And now they're looking back and going, that was a mistake, probably.
The other mistake or consistent mistake through the course of the season has been red cards that have come back to haunt them time and time again. And again, Arsenal will argue with a couple of them earlier in the season, particularly the Declan Rice one, but this costs them yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, silly red cards. That one was Lewis Skelly losing the ball on the halfway line. It can happen. But the Rice one, kicking the ball away, Trossard kicking the ball away, even the one at Bournemouth when Saliba got sent off, it was because Trossard had kicked the ball back towards his own goal for inexplicable reasons. So, like, these isolated incidents are just undermining the team throughout.
It's a really key point, because I keep hearing this word discipline thrown around, as though these guys are going into matches and are unable to control their temper, or, you know, doing the kind of thing that you would associate with a loss of discipline. 2 things struck me about that footage we just saw a second ago. The first is that you're dealing with a young player. Young players will make mistakes. We've got to give young players leeway for that. The second is, it's a canny, capable, very tricky player who has robbed him of the ball, who's seen his stride and managed to get in there. He's tried to take one for the team, believing it would be a yellow card. The idea that you can be concerned about their discipline as though they're a band of bruising, you know...
booting people up in the air.
Exactly. But it's not malice.
The word, maybe then the word that might be more apt is emotion. One of the criticisms is that they're quite up and down, Arsenal, that, you know, the celebration police will be out if they win a big game. They're very, very high, aren't they? But then there is a criticism that if they lose their way in a game, it's very difficult for them to fight their way back into it sometimes. That once they have a really major setback in a game, they struggle to sort of recover their equilibrium a bit. And maybe Darren's right that discipline is not perhaps the right word, but sometimes emotionally they're not on as an even a keel as someone like Arne Slot, who just seems to be dead level all the time.
I think Arsenal is a very emotionally intense place. I think within the club, partly driven by Arteta. I think that's one of his great strengths too. That intensity he brings every day is what drives the club. But equally, I do think it puts people, I think generally, in the club, they really want it. They know how much it means. They really, really want it. It's not a relaxed place. And even at the Emirates Stadium, you know, after 15, 20 minutes of a game, if the game's not really flowing the way the fans want it to, you can feel that anxiety just creeping in all the time. Like, it comes in so much quicker at the Emirates than at other stadiums. I think that's kind of the desperation they have to win this Premier League and to get back to that position they believe they should be in. And they want it so much that it kind of exudes out of them a bit, and I think it does get in the way. I'm not sure how much that affects the red cards, though. I think, as I say, I agree with you, Darren. It's not malice, this disciplinary issue. They're not bullying teams and sort of clamping down on players. They're just doing dumb stuff too often.
I think there is a kind of...
Which is kind
doing
of
dumb stuff
yeah,
too
it's
often.
pretty basic analysis, but I think that is what I think.
That's all you got you in here, Sam, for that sort of thing.
Any club can do that, A. And B, we develop a vernacular, a vocabulary within football that everyone just buys instantly into without actually, in some cases, looking at the context of what we're seeing. Because I don't think there is anything about Skelly's discipline there that is a cause for concern. You can look at the points lost after red cards, that's all legitimate, but I think we have to characterise it correctly. And what he's done there, he's made a mistake. Actually, it's partly a mistake, but also it's a lot due to a very clever, technically, a guy who kind of thinks 2 moves in front, and Kudus has robbed him. He looks as though he's going to race clear, and Skelly's taken 1 for the team. We see players taking 1 for the team at City, at Liverpool, all tactical fouling, all that kind of thing. Let's actually say what we can see rather than trying to characterise it negatively.
Do you think that some of, to use that phrase, negative characterisation, some of the frustration is, from Arsenal's perspective, that they've been dealing with this points-guzzling monster for 2 seasons, and now they're not there, everyone's thinking, well, if it's not City, it should be us, and didn't counter for Liverpool being so good and they're on a slot?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely the case. I think there's a real sense of frustration among the fans that Arsenal have been so good for 2 years straight and pushing City all the way. And they seem to have almost exhausted City by doing so. Like, City had to put everything on the line last year to get there.
And maybe exhausted themselves at the same time.
And maybe exhausted themselves. And Liverpool have just sort of emerged and just walked straight through happily, really. But also, I mean, the fact is for Arsenal, I still think if they had all their players fit at all times, they're the best team in the league. But the issue is they haven't had them fit at all times. They've had Odegaard out for 2 months, Saka out for 3 months. They've had these red cards that have come out of nowhere. And generally, they've not been able to hit the levels of consistency that they've shown for the last 2 years. And having that drop-off of, 5, 10%, 15%, that's enough in the Premier League. And if Liverpool are so good and so consistent, and crucially, they've managed the availability of their players so well, I mean, in many ways, the Premier League's becoming a battle of who can stay fit.
Yeah.
And Liverpool have won that battle all season, really.
And I guess, Darren, the theme in the papers is what we've just discussed, which is that Arsenal, it feels done.
Very much so. It's a really nice segue into this piece in the Mail on Sunday from Sammy Mokbel, because it sums it up very succinctly, as Sammy, one of the best match reporters in the business at the moment, does. Look at the subdeck as well. Gunners hit the self-destruct button as Bowen deals them a massive blow in the title race. It's actually a 2nd successive season that West Ham have beaten Arsenal at home. The headline is self-explanatory: game over. And the little caption on the bottom as well, I don't know if you can make it out, where the points were lost: Wolves, Bournemouth, City, Brighton, and now West Ham. I want to show you this as well in the Sun, because the headline is, again, actually, it's gone as the headline, but the odds compilers already deciding that Liverpool are going to win. And so they are remunerating people on that basis. And it does look very much all over. The feeling is that if Liverpool were to go to Manchester City and win today, then it will be all over. A lot of people, and I've said this before, I still think it's open. A lot of people forgetting Liverpool have yet to go to Manchester City under Pep Guardiola and win. We all kind of just play this game on paper sometimes, when there is so much domestic football, European football, international football to be played. Anything can happen. We don't wish it to happen, of course. We don't want teams to lose players, but we've seen Saka injured. We've seen Odegaard injured. We don't know what could happen in terms of red card, suspension, anything.
But what we need to talk to Merce about now is what happened at the Emirates today. Arsenal's unbeaten record in the Premier League at home has gone. West Ham doing what they did last season and winning at the Emirates. Last season 2-0, this season 1-0. Jared Bowen with his 50th Premier League goal for the Hammers this afternoon. And only 2 shots on target from Arsenal in that game, the fewest they've had in the Premier League at home so far this season. And we wondered about those injuries, the key injuries to the likes of Havertz as well, whether they had found a new striker last week against Leicester City. I think we found out the answer this afternoon.
Yeah, I mean, they were fortunate last week, let's be honest. It was 0-0. They made Leicester look half decent last week, and Mourinho comes on and scores 2 very good goals. a hard position to play centre forward. There's not a lot of top centre forwards around. It's a difficult position to play, and to just throw people up there and expect they're going to do the magic, especially when they've never played there, for me is mind blowing. Really, absolutely mind blowing. He looked like a fish up a tree, if I'm being honest. I don't mean disrespectful to him. He's a holding midfield player. It's like me going and playing at centre half. I mean, you just don't do that. It's like Clinton going to play right back. You know what I mean? You just can't do that. So, yeah, I worry for Arsenal now. I worry for them now. I watched
listen, for you, you said it. You talk about Liverpool booking team buses and all that for the Open Top Parade. You think the title race is over? Worry about them beyond that.
1,000,000%. 1,000,000%. There's no way Arsenal can catch Liverpool. They've got no forward. They've got a young 17-year-old who's going to have a bright future, amazing player.
How did Ranieri look today?
No, he struggled, but he's 17 years of age. He's going to be like that for the.
You can't ask a 17-year-old to be the answer,
can you? All the time.
Yeah.
But he will be going like that, and when it gets like that, it's hard for a 17-year-old to come back like. So that's hard. Trossard's he's a bit part player in my opinion. I think if everybody's fit, he's one of them you want to come on with 30 minutes to go if you need him. I think he's that kind of player. But he's got to play every game now. And then they've got no centre forward. There's absolutely no chance. I mean, even if Liverpool got beat 7-0 tomorrow, they still can't win the league. They can't. Not with. I see enough today to know that they are going to struggle to the end of the season. And how many games have they got left?
Well, they've got Nottingham Forest away next, 12 next to come, Man United away, then
12,
Chelsea at home.
12
so 12 total they've got
12
left.
total games. They do well to win half.
Really?
They've got nothing going forward, absolutely nothing going forward. I don't mean, it's going to be so easy for teams to defend. I mean, they just played against the West Ham team that, let's be honest, they're not like unbelievable at the back. It's not like we're sitting there and we're going, oh, it's Van Dijk and who else, at the back. They're just a solid outfit. They were comfortable. What's the name? Areola made one save with his feet that I would have saved. I mean, this is Arsenal at home who haven't lost a game at home this season. They haven't got any forwards. They've got absolutely no chance. All of a sudden now, the PSV game has become a heads or tails game. Heads or tails game when, let's be honest, if Martinelli, Saka and Havertz were fit, you're looking at that game and going, well, that's a shoo-in. They're through to the quarter-final. Now, I honestly, I don't see it now. Who they got next? Forest?
They have.
Yeah, it won't be Forest.
Midweek,
They won't be
away
Forest.
at Nottingham Forest.
They won't be Forest.
Wednesday.
No, if they only win in 6 out of 12 games, they won't finish second.
Yeah, I ain't sure. I don't know if they will finish second. I think they've just got to come in the top 4, haven't they? I mean, at the end of the day, they got to get. I don't see.
So for you, the season's objectives have changed that dramatically with the injuries, the players they're missing.
Well,
it's now about just making sure they finish in the top 4 title race for you. Gone.
Simon, what I've seen in the last 2 weeks, completely and utterly gone. They've played West Ham, who are about 6th bottom. They got destroyed by Brentford last week, and then they played Leicester, I mean. I want to be horrible here, but we probably get a team together here that are going to give them a game. And, you know what I mean? And keep it tight for an hour or so. Sure. Do you know what I mean? And then they'd end up destroying us. But it's not like they've just played like Liverpool away and